He called me 2 days before the party. His voice was tight, like he was holding something between his teeth. Said, "We're just trying to keep things simple. No drama. You understand, right?" I didn't answer right away. Just sat there, holding the phone in one hand and the remote in the other. The TV still murmuring something I wasn't really watching. He took my silence as permission, said, "Jenna's folks are coming in from Vermont and I just don't want, anything awkward." I asked what would be awkward about me standing in the corner and saying happy birthday to my grandson. He laughed, but not really, more like an exhale that sounded like guilt dressed up as irritation. Said just, "Say anything." Okay. And that was it. Not an invitation. Not a request. A warning. Don't say anything, so I didn't go. I sat at the kitchen table that morning, my coat already on. It's a gift wrapped in blue paper with little stars on it. It's a card with a picture of a frog playing a trumpet. He'd have liked that last time I saw him. He said frogs were the best animal because they lived in two worlds at once. I kept checking the time. 11 o'clock, 11:30, 12 at 12:15. I unwrapped the gift myself, slowly, like undoing a bandage. Just to see if it still made sense, if I'd imagined the whole thing. But no, it was the book he'd asked for, the one with the space explorer and the fox. I flipped through the pages, read a few lines out loud to no one, then I closed it and slid it back into the drawer. I took off my coat, I made a cup of tea. I sat down and didn't speak for the rest of the day. They posted photos online that night. I didn't go looking, but someone tagged me in one. Jenna's sister, probably. It's a group shot of everyone standing under a paper banner that said Happy 5th, in green and gold letters. My son was in the middle, one hand on the boy's shoulder, the other around his wife's waist. They all looked neat, tidy, as if no one had been erased in the photo. My grandson was blowing out candles. The cake was white with sprinkles. There was a small crowd behind him cheering. Strangers to me? The caption read, "So lucky to have our tribe all together." I kept reading that word, tribe. Like love had a guest list. Like family was something you auditioned for and I hadn't made the final cut. I didn't call, I didn't comment. Forward the photo to anyone. Instead, I opened the notebook I kept near the stove. The one where I used to write down funny things he'd say as a child. Little sentences like "the moon followed me home" or "I think dreams are where clouds go to sleep." I turned to a blank page and wrote, "He told me not to say anything, so I didn't." Then I sat back, let the pen roll to the edge of the table, and fell. Very still. The silence was the kind that fills a room after something living has left it. Not grief, exactly. Not yet. Just the awareness of an absence. Like the shape of a body after it's been lifted from a bed. I'd raised him alone. His father left before his first birthday. Some excuse about needing to feel free. I'd never ask for anything after that. Not money, not help, not pity. I just worked, cooked, waited up at night for fevers to break or homework to get done or for him to sneak back in after curfew. He used to tell me everything. When he was 10, he cried. When I missed a school play because I picked up an extra shift, he told me he didn't care about the performance, just that he hadn't seen my face in the crowd. I remember hugging him that night, the smell of peanut butter still on his shirt from lunch. His hair sticking up in the back. I would have sat in a fire for him. And now, I wasn't welcome in a room with balloons. I wasn't angry, not then, not exactly. Or like, I couldn't find myself in the story anymore. Like they were writing new chapters. I was being edited out. So I did what I always do when things begin to break. I cleaned, scrubbed the stove, shook out the rug, took the recycling down, even though it was raining. I moved through the rooms like I was packing for something, though I hadn't made a plan yet. But something had shifted. That call those few words had loosened something in me. A thread pulled too many times, finally giving way. Don't say anything, as if my voice was the danger. As if the problem was not what had been done to me, but what I might name if I dared speak. So I stayed quiet for one more day, for one more breath, and then began to plan. It wasn't always like this. When he was little, he'd tug on my apron while I cooked, always asking questions. Why the water had to boil before the pasta. Why the window had to stay closed when it rained. Why his dad left. That one I never really answered. I did my best, though. I made sure there was dinner on the table. I went to every school event, even when I had to take an extra shift at the diner to cover the electric bill. I clapped the loudest at his piano recitals. He didn't notice that my hands were raw from scrubbing floors. He only saw me there, smiling, and I suppose that's what I wanted. I remember once, when he was 12, he asked if he could change his last name. Said he didn't want to carry his father's anymore. He asked if he could take mine. Said, yes, of course, and we filled out the papers together at the courthouse. He held my hand on the walk back to the bus stop. It was October. I remember the crunch of the leaves under our feet. I remember thinking, we're going to be all right. He was a good kid, sweet, even kind to stray cats and old neighbors. Time does things. Life adds weight and somehow subtracts memory. When he got into college, he hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Said he wouldn't have made it without me, that he'd pay me back one day. I never asked for anything. But over time, the phone calls got shorter. The visits turned into holidays only. Then even those became maybe next year. The woman he married didn't like me. She never said so outright, but it was there in the way she smiled too tightly when I brought over cookies. In the way she introduced me like an afterthought at her baby shower. Not Mom, just Linda. The first time she visited the house, she looked around and asked if we'd considered downsizing. She was polite about it, in that brittle, perfect way some people are. But I heard what she meant. Your house isn't good enough. You aren't either still. I kept trying. I offered to watch the baby while they worked. I bought diapers, formula, little soft hats. She said they had it under control. That they wanted to do things their own way. I started to feel like a stranger. In a story I used to belong to. One day, I got a voicemail from him. He said they decided not to do a big Thanksgiving that year. Just the three of them. Quiet. I said, I understood. I lied. I made stuffing for one and watched old game shows. In my pajamas at Christmas, they dropped by late in the evening. Just 15 minutes. The baby was already asleep. They gave me a gift card tucked in an envelope. My name misspelled. No note. I told myself it was just the season. That things would settle. That love always circles back. But then came the birthday. Party. Their child's 5th. I'd helped raise him when they first moved back to the city. I taught him to count to 20 using canned beans on the kitchen table. I read him books about frogs and stars and trains. He used to call me Nana Bean because of the game we played. But a week before the party, my son called. His voice was low. Careful. Like he was walking on ice. He said, I just want everything to go smoothly. I said, of course. He said, maybe ... Maybe don't say too much. You know how you can be. I don't want drama. Jenna's family will be there. I said nothing at first. I heard the way he said it. You know how you can be like I'm a hazard? Like I'm something that might go off. If nudged the wrong way, I asked if he still wanted me to come. There was a pause. He said, we think it might be better if you sat this one out. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember sitting there, my knees pressed together, my hands folded in my lap like I was in church. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. I looked around at the photos on the wall. The little plaster handprint he made in kindergarten. The framed note he wrote me on Mother's Day when he was 8. You are the best cooker, and I love you more than mac and cheese. I sat there and thought, maybe they've already erased me. Maybe I'm just the leftover part they don't know how to throw out. That night, I opened a drawer and found all the cards I'd saved. Every crayon drawing, every thank you note, every tiny scrap of love I thought was permanent. I touched them like they were relics, like something sacred, like something extinct. And I whispered to the room, he warned me not to say anything. So I didn't. A few days after the party I wasn't welcome at. I stopped by the bank. Not for any real reason, just habit. I'd been with the same credit union since before my son was born. The tellers used to slip lollipops into my purse when I brought 'em in sticky and wide-eyed, asking why grown-ups always look tired. I liked the familiar hum of the place. I liked the way things still made sense there. You deposited, you withdrew. There were rules and ledgers and signatures. You couldn't erase someone without paper saying so. I was just going to check the balance. Maybe pull out a little cash. For groceries. But the woman at the counter frowned and clicked something on her screen. Then asked if I'd updated my authorization preferences. I said no. She asked if I had recently added a joint account holder. I didn't answer right away. She turned the screen slightly toward herself and said, "Shows here your son has access." My hand stayed flat on the counter, but I could feel my skin go cold. I asked when that was added. She gave me a date. 3 months ago. 3 months. That was around the time he'd stopped answering my calls as often. When I asked about the raised charge on the phone bill and he brushed it off, said things were complicated, that I didn't need to worry. I remember blinking, trying to stay polite. Because the woman behind the glass was just doing her job. But something quiet split inside me then. Like wallpaper peeling from a corner I hadn't noticed before. I asked her if anything had been withdrawn. She hesitated, then nodded. A few small things, a payment on a new insurance policy, a charge for a furniture delivery service, something labeled as relocation prep. I left the bank without taking out the groceries money. I sat in the car for a long time, hands on the wheel, engine off. The air felt too thin. Like I was underwater and hadn't noticed I was sinking. When I got home, I opened the drawer where I kept the paperwork, the deed to the house. My will. The folder marked final in black ink, written back when I thought organizing my life would be a gift to him someday. The copy of my will was there, but it had been moved. I could tell by the way the papers sat differently, how the edges didn't. Quite a line. I opened the folder slowly. The last page was a signature sheet. There was mine. Dated years ago, and then below it, faint impressions where another sheet had once been pressed on top. Something had been laid there, held there. I don't know how long I stared at it. Long enough that the sky darkened outside and the lamp buzzed on automatically. I remember sitting very still, not moving, not crying, just letting the ache find its shape inside me. I'd trusted him with everything, not out of foolishness, out of love. When his wife got laid off last spring, I offered to help. I said they could use the house as backup if things got tight. I didn't mean for him to take it, not like this, not without telling me. I checked the mailbox the next day. Buried between a coupon flyer and a water bill was a letter from a law office, not addressed to me, addressed to him. At my address, I opened it. I don't regret it. Inside was a draft, power of attorney documents. A second, will both unsigned. But there, printed at the top, was my full name, my birth date, my address, and beneath, in cold, clean type, client son's name, acting in preparation for guardianship transition. That word. Guardianship. They were planning for me to disappear. While I was still sitting in the house they were trying to take, I put the letter back exactly where I found it, slid it back between the papers like nothing had happened, and I sat down in the kitchen, the same chair I'd sat in when he told me he was leaving for college. The one with the wobbly leg and the scratch from the time he dropped a plate trying to make pancakes. I closed my eyes and listened. Not to anything in the house. Just to the sound of everything that had gone quiet between us. It wasn't just about the money. Wasn't just about the house. It was the way he'd decided I no longer got to be a person with choices. He had stripped me of something without a fight, 'cause he knew I wouldn't fight, 'cause he knew I loved him too much. To believe he could do something like this, he hadn't asked, hadn't warned. He had prepared documents with my name on them while sitting in my kitchen and eating my soup. I wanted to believe it was his wife, that maybe she'd pushed, maybe she'd orchestrated it. But that would be too easy. I knew my son. I knew the way he folded under pressure, the way he rationalized things, told himself stories to soften the edge of betrayal. She needs help. She's not managing. This is what's best. But I'd still been doing my taxes. Still cooking, cleaning, planting. Zinnias. Still sending cards, remembering birthdays, brushing my teeth every night like some kind of promise that tomorrow would come. And he had erased me in slow, careful pencil strokes. Not dramatic, not cruel, just ... tidy. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call him and demand to know what he was thinking. That's not how I've ever handled grief. I cleaned the kitchen instead. It always starts there for me, with the sponge and the hot water. The repetition of circles in the same old places. I cleared the counter. I wiped down the handles of the refrigerator, took out the trash, and then scrubbed the can itself. Grief needs a place to land. Night, it landed in bleach and lemon oil . After the surfaces were shining, I sat on the floor of the pantry and cried for the second time that week. Not sobs, just quiet streams of water falling onto my apron. No sound but my breath, trying to make room for itself again. It was a different kind of hurt this time. Not the sharp sting of betrayal. Something slower, more permanent. Like a clock winding down that you know you'll never reset. The next morning, I woke early. The kind of early that doesn't come with sleep, just with decision. I made myself a cup of tea I didn't drink, sat at the table with a yellow pad and a pen. I started writing down everything with my name on it. Accounts, titles, the deed, my pension. The utilities I still paid from the same checking account I'd let him access when he needed help after college. He used to say, "You're the only person I trust with my life." I wrote that down too, not as evidence, just as memory, a sentence. He once gave me that I didn't want to forget, even if it came to mean something else entirely. Then I called a lawyer. Not his. Mine. I'd used her years ago when a neighbor had a fence dispute. Nothing serious, but she remembered me. She said she could fit me in that afternoon. I packed a bag just in case I didn't want to come home that night. On the way to her office, I looked at the rows of houses as they passed by. All those windows. All those little quiet lives. I wondered how many other women were sitting inside them, holding truths too heavy to say out loud. I told her everything. Showed her the letter addressed to my son, the bank statement, the impressions left by the missing documents. She didn't ask if I was sure. She didn't tell me I was overreacting. She nodded and said, "Let's lock down what's yours." I almost cried again, but I didn't. Instead, I exhaled. Like someone had finally passed me a life raft. We froze the accounts, changed the passwords, redirected the mail. She said, "Do you want to confront him?" Said no. I want to disappear from the part of his life where I am invisible. She smiled. She didn't think it was dramatic. She didn't ask for an explanation. I signed papers for a new will, drafted a revocation of power of attorney, set up a trust with my own name and no one else's. It felt like sweeping away footprints after someone has trampled through your garden. It wouldn't fix the flowers, but it would stop the next step. I stayed at a motel that night. It's one of those places with thin towels and vending machines that hum like they're thinking. I didn't mind. I wasn't there for comfort. I was there. For quiet, I turned off my phone, watched the fan spin overhead. I opened the drawer beside the bed and found a Bible. I didn't read it. I just held it for a while. The weight of it. The idea of something that still had pages no one had torn. Out, I started talking out loud. Not in prayer, just to the room. I said, "I won't let you take the rest of me." I said it to the ceiling, to the fan, to the bedspread, to the silence he'd left me in. That night, I wrote a list. Not of what I'd lost, of what I still had: my name, my body, my stories, my recipes, my voice. That voice had been quiet too long. It had bent too far, softened too much, trying to be palatable, respectable, non-intrusive. I'd been making myself smaller for years, so he could feel big, so he could feel proud, so he could feel unburdened. But I had weight. I had shape. I had edges. I remembered something odd from when he was 5. We'd gone to the beach. He ran straight into the water, no fear, splashing and laughing and shouting, "Look at me." Then a wave knocked him under. Not hard, but enough. He came up gasping, crying, furious. Said the ocean had been mean. Said I hadn't warned him. I wrapped him in a towel and held him close. Told him the ocean didn't mean anything, that it just did what it did. And that from now on, he'd need to learn where the deep parts were. I thought of that as I fell asleep in the motel bed, fully dressed, shoes still on. I was the ocean now. He hadn't asked where the deep parts were, and I wasn't going to save him this time. I didn't go back to the house right away. I drove by it once, just to see. The curtains were still drawn the way I'd left them. The porch light had gone out. The rosemary plant by the steps looked thirsty, leaning sideways in its cracked pot. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I'd already begun the process, not just of separating the paperwork and legal pieces, but the emotional threads too. That part was slower, harder. Undoing years of being the one who showed up first, stayed last, asked nothing. I kept thinking of the things I hadn't packed yet. The framed photo of him at 8, grinning, front teeth missing. The dish towel with the embroidered bee my mother gave me when I moved in. The recipe box. My wedding ring, still sitting in a tin with rubber bands and spare buttons, even though his father hadn't been in our lives for over 30 years. None of it felt urgent now. I'd checked into a small extended stay place off the highway. Weekly rates, kitchenette, neutral carpet. Nothing pretty, but clean, quiet. The front desk clerk was a woman my age with a slow voice and tired eyes. She asked if I needed anything else, then offered me an extra pillow. I took it, not for comfort, just to remember the small kindness. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. I opened a drawer and laid out the files the lawyer gave me. My name again and again, in bold type. Owner. Executor, trustee. No longer mother, at least not in the same way, but still present, still real. I called the bank again and closed the joint account, reopened one in my name only. They asked if I wanted to notify the other party. Said no, just do it quietly. I made a list of online accounts. Email, shopping sites, utilities, doctor's portal. Changed the passwords, printed confirmations. Labeled a new envelope, current. Each action was quiet, mechanical, but every stroke of the pen made something shift inside me. I wasn't erasing him, was removing the access. The assumption that my life was still open to him like a cupboard with no lock. There's a difference. I booked a P.O. box and left a change of address form at the post office. If I didn't include a forwarding address for him or his wife. I imagined the day they'd check the mail and see the little note undeliverable. I imagined her asking what happened. I imagined him shrugging. I imagined silence after that. The motel room had a small corkboard near the desk. I tacked up a photo of the zinnias from last spring. I'd taken it without thinking. One morning when the light had hit them just right. I hadn't even remembered printing it. It was in the bottom of my purse, folded, a little wrinkled, but still bright, still blooming. I wrote in my notebook each night, just a few lines. What I'd done that day, what I hadn't, I didn't cry. After the third night, not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because I'd learned how to hold the ache without spilling it. I'd begun calling places, apartments, small rentals, even a trailer park outside of town with decent reviews. No one cared about my last name. No one asked why I was moving. I was just another voice on the line. I liked that at the grocery store near the motel, I picked up tea bags, apples, a can of soup. The cashier said, "Hope your evening's peaceful." I nearly thanked her for that word. Peaceful, he used to say. You're the only one who never made things harder. And yet here we were. One night I wrote a letter, not to send, just to write. It began, I was a good mother. That's all I ever wanted. You two know? I filled 2 pages. I folded them. I tucked them under the extra pillow. A week after I left, I called the utilities and transferred the house out of my name. I wasn't selling it yet. I just didn't want the bills in my name anymore. It was an old house. It needed repairs. It had seen birthdays, arguments, laughter, silence. I didn't owe it anything, and it no longer owed me. I hired someone to go in and change the locks, a retired locksmith. Kind eyes, said he'd done this before, didn't ask questions, left me a voicemail when it was done, said, "You're all set now." Door shuts good and tight. I saved the message. I walked by the house again the next day, just once more. No one home. No one home, no cars in the drive. I didn't go up the steps. I just stood at the edge of the lawn, looked up at the window that used to. Be mine. The rosemary had withered completely. The plant was all brown. I left it there. I didn't pull it up. Let them wonder what it meant. Back at the motel, I made soup. I ate slowly. I listened to the low buzz of the TV from the next room. Someone was laughing on a game show. I smiled not because it was funny, but because it didn't matter anymore. I was here, not gone, just not theirs. It started with the voicemail. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen. His voice felt distant, too rehearsed, like he'd practiced concern in the mirror and still didn't quite believe it. He waited a beat, then added, "Call me when you get this, okay?" I didn't. 3 days later, another one came. Sounded tighter. A little less polished. I stopped by the house and, noticed the locks were changed. "Not sure what's going on? Can you just call me?" The pause at the end wasn't a pause at all. It was the sound of control slipping. He still hadn't figured it out yet. I turned off notifications, kept the phone on silent, let the messages pile up. Then came the texts, first from him, then from her. "Linda, this is really confusing. We're worried. Please just let us know where you are." She never called me Mom. Never once. Not even when I held her child for hours so she could sleep. Not when I cooked her dinner after her surgery. Not when I gave up my weekends so they could go to that conference in Seattle. I didn't respond. It was quiet for a day. Then it picked up again. My son sent a long message. The kind people type when they're trying to sound calm but are unraveling underneath. "Mom, I don't know what's going on, but it's not okay to just disappear like this. You're scaring people. We're trying to do what's best for you, and you're acting like we're the enemy. I don't get it. You've always trusted me. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. Don't make it harder than it needs to be." That line, "Don't make it harder than it needs to be," it was always the same script. He'd used it when he dropped out of piano lessons, when he married without telling me until after, when he asked for money again and again and promised he'd pay it back. Every version of the same message. "Let me do this the way I want, okay? And you absorb the consequence quietly." I turned off the phone entirely, bought a prepaid one number. The lawyers. That night, I sat in the motel parking lot and watched the sky darken. The trees swayed, soft and slow, like they weren't in a hurry to belong to anyone. Inside, I checked my email. That's when I saw it. He'd posted on social media. It was a picture of the house. My house. The porch swept. A new doormat. Flower pots. That hadn't been there before. The caption read, "Big changes happening. Taking care of the people who took care of you. It's not always easy, but it's right." A dozen likes. Heart emojis. People commenting with, "You're such a good son and bless you for stepping up." I stared at it for a long time. He'd made me vanish with a filter and a caption, wrapped it in virtue, painted himself as a savior while I sat in a rented room eating canned soup. He hadn't said I was missing, just implied I'd been ... moved, handled, filed away gently under the category of taken care of. 2 days later, another post went up. This time a picture of him with his wife and their son, smiling. The caption, "New beginnings, new responsibilities. Grateful for the chance to make this house a home again. Again. as if I'd simply warmed it up for them, held it in place until they were ready. Someone asked in the comments, "Where's your mom?" He didn't reply, but someone else tagged me, my old account. The one I hadn't posted on in years. It's just my name, blue in the comments, like a ghost showing up at the door. He removed the tag, and then, hour later, the account was blocked. That was the moment it shifted. Not the betrayal, not the legal mess, not the fake smiles on their porch. It was the block. The digital vanishing act. The attempt to wipe even my name from his curated version of the story. I shut the laptop and went. Outside, the air was still warm. A boy was riding a bike in the parking lot, wobbling slightly, legs too short for the pedals. His dad walked behind him, patient, hands ready to catch him if he fell. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner. Back inside, I pulled out my notebook and wrote one sentence: "I am not your backstory." The next morning, the motel manager slipped an envelope under my door. No return address, no postage. Just my name in the handwriting I'd once taught him. Shaping the letters carefully on a placemat while he ate his cereal. Inside was a note: "Please talk to me. I'm sorry if this has gotten out of hand. We just wanted to be sure you were safe. We thought you were struggling. We thought maybe it was time for what? I wanted to ask time for me to stop being a person. Time for me to shrink into silence. Time for you to inherit something still alive." I didn't write back. I didn't call. I placed the letter in the trash under the empty soup can and pressed it down gently. He was unraveling now. But I was not his to catch. I moved into the upstairs apartment over a florist's shop. The rent was reasonable. The windows faced east. And in the mornings, I could hear the rustle of stems and the quiet clink of buckets being filled downstairs. The landlord, a woman named Jeannie, was soft-spoken and wore loose cotton dresses even in the cold. She asked no questions when I signed the lease under my maiden name. She just slid the keys across the counter and said, "Let me know if anything leaks or creaks. That's all I need from you." That night, I made myself a grilled cheese sandwich on a little hot plate. The apartment still smelled faintly of lilies from the stockroom below. I ate slowly, sitting on a cushion I'd brought from the motel, and watched the shadows stretch across the hardwood floor. There was peace in the smallness of it. No family photos on the wall. No mailbox filling with his name. Just mine. I bought a second-hand armchair and a lamp, a kettle, a plant I didn't know the name of but liked anyway. The woman at the thrift store threw in a little radio for free. Said she didn't like the silence, and maybe I didn't either. I kept the radio low. Mostly classical stations, nothing with words. I walked each morning before the town woke up. Past the bus stop. Past a little diner with chipped red stools. One morning I went in and ordered a cup of coffee. The waitress asked if I wanted cream. I said yes. Steve smiled and said, "Me too." Every time. It felt good, that tiny moment. No past, no expectation. Just to people and the sound of cups being set down gently. Jeannie's niece came by the shop most afternoons. Quiet girl named Mara. 12 years old, braces, always carrying a paperback. One day I found her sitting on the stairs outside my door, crying softly. Her mother had yelled at her for losing a textbook. She didn't want to go back down yet. I sat beside her and asked what she was reading. She showed me the cover. Story about a girl who runs away from home with a suitcase full of maps. I told her I liked stories like that. Ones where the girl gets to decide where she ends up. She asked if I had any books. I gave her one the next day. It's an old copy of Anne of Green Gables. Told her she could borrow it as long as she liked. She smiled with her whole face. Said she thought I was probably someone who understood things that meant more than she knew. I never told her anything about my son. Not because I was ashamed. It's just because it didn't matter here. In this version of my life, I didn't have to explain what was taken. I just had to tend what remained. I kept up my notebook. Each evening, I'd write 3 things. What I noticed, what I let go of, what I still carried. Some days the entries were short. A sparrow eating breadcrumbs on the sill. The need to be explained. It's the smell of his baby blanket when it was new. Some days longer. There was a stillness now. Not the aching kind. The chosen one. The kind that settles in your bones when you finally stop asking to be heard by people who keep turning away. I didn't forgive him. Not then. But I didn't feed the anger either. I just let it dry up, like fruit on the branch that no one picked. It wasn't mine to hold anymore. I saw them once from across the street outside the grocery store. His wife was walking ahead, tapping on her phone. He was pushing the cart, their boy trailing behind, dragging his feet. The boy looked taller, thinner, older than I remembered. He didn't call me Nana Bean anymore. Didn't remember, probably. Or wasn't allowed to. I stood still. They didn't see me. I didn't move. Not because I was afraid, but because I felt nothing. Just distance. Like watching actors play. A scene I used to be in, one I'd memorized and stepped away from. That night I wrote, I am not who they remember. I am not who they get to forget. The next morning, Mara knocked on my door. She had a bouquet in her hands. Wildflowers wrapped in a napkin. Said she made it from the scraps they couldn't sell. I thanked her and placed them in a glass on the windowsill. They lasted longer than I expected. Bright yellow, soft purple, green stems with no names I knew. I didn't need names anymore. I just needed things that lasted, and they did. It was a Saturday, late afternoon. I had just come back from the little market 2 blocks down, a paper bag of apples and tea in my arm. I'd stopped to chat with Jeannie, who was trimming hydrangeas on the shop's front step, and she said the blue ones always droop too soon, no matter how sweetly you speak to them. When I climbed the stairs to my door, he was standing there, hands in his coat pockets. That same nervous shifting he used to do when he was about to lie as a boy? I recognized it immediately. That slight twist of the shoulder, it's the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I didn't speak. I set the bag down by my feet and waited. He said he'd been trying to find me, that he just wanted to talk, that this wasn't how he meant things to go. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, left it open behind. Me? He didn't ask to come in. But he did. He stood just inside the doorway, looking around like he expected to find proof of something. Like the little apartment would somehow explain me. I didn't offer him tea. He said he didn't know what happened. That it all spiraled. That Jenna was the one pushing for control. That she'd said it would be easier to handle things early, just in case. Just in case, he said again, like it was a reasonable thing to say about your mother while she's still standing upright and breathing and paying her own bills, he said. We thought maybe you weren't managing. I turned toward him slowly. I asked, managing what? He said nothing. I watched his throat work to swallow. I watched his mouth open and close again. He said, we didn't mean to hurt you. I let the silence hold. He started talking fast after that. About the bank, about the house, about the letter from the lawyer. He said maybe he'd handled it poorly, but it was from love. That word love. He tried to say it like it would make things disappear. He said I panicked. I thought maybe you were getting confused, and if something happened to you, I'd have to untangle it all. I said nothing had happened to me, till you did. That stopped him. He looked down at the floor. It's the same scuffed floorboards I'd swept. That morning while humming to the radio, he said, I'm sorry, Mom. I waited for something else. An explanation, maybe, or the truth. But all he did was stand there, looking sorry. The kind of sorry that wants forgiveness before it's earned. I asked him one question. Did you ever think to just ask me? He started to say he had once or twice, but I stopped him with a small shake of my head. I told him I wasn't angry anymore. That's not what this was. I told him anger had a short half-life. That what he'd left in its place was something different, something heavier. A kind of absence that lives beside you and never speaks. He said, I miss you. I said, you miss what I used to give you. He opened his mouth again, but I held up my hand. Not a gesture I'd used much in his life, but it felt right now. He closed. His lips I told him I had rebuilt something small and mine, that I wouldn't hand it over again, that I didn't want access or emergencies or obligation disguised as care. He said, "What about the boy?" "He misses you too." I nodded. Maybe he did. But I told him it wasn't my job to rescue a child from the people raising him. Not anymore. That I had tried. I had shown up. I had loved. But love without respect is a slow death. And I didn't come here to die. He was crying now. Quiet tears, like mine used to be. He asked if I forgave him. I told him forgiveness isn't a door that swings back open. It's a window you close so the storm doesn't come in again. I said, "I'm not angry." "But no, I'm not going back." He asked if he could call me. I said, "Not right now." I asked him to leave. Kindly, but without pause, he stood there one last second. Like he might argue, or maybe just collapse. But then he turned, walked out, and closed the door behind him. I stood for a while after, my hands trembling, but not from fear, from freedom. That night, I told Jeannie I'd be helping out in the shop if she ever needed an extra set of hands. She smiled and said, "You always looked like someone who knew how to cut clean." Mara came by with another bouquet the next day. This one had one of those blue hydrangeas in it. It's drooping already, just like Jeannie said. I propped it up with a wooden skewer and a piece of string. It lasted longer than anyone expected. The weather turned warm. Again, the shop below me, filled with scent lavender, mint, eucalyptus stems clipped and bundled for weddings. On Saturdays, people gathered outside with coffee cups and sunglasses, talking about anniversaries and centerpieces and love. Sometimes I watched them through the front window. Sometimes I didn't. Jeannie asked if I wanted to help with deliveries. Said she trusted me with the keys. I told her I wasn't going far. I liked that, being trusted, but not owned. I never told her much about what came before. She never pressed. I think she knew without needing the details. You can spot the women who've been quietly erased. We carry it in our spines, in the pause before we answer when someone says our name. One evening, I sat on the floor of my apartment, folding laundry, when I found the letter I'd written months ago, the one I never sent. The one that began, "I was a good mother. That's all I ever wanted you to know." I unfolded it, smoothed the pages, read it slowly, as if it had been written by someone else. It didn't make me cry. It made me still. I thought about burning it, letting it curl into ash in a chipped ceramic bowl. But I didn't. I folded it again and placed it in the back of my recipe box, tucked between lemon cookies and meatloaf. It belonged there. Not as proof, not as pain, just as part of the story. He hasn't called again. There was one more message, a few weeks after he visited, just a line. "I hope you're okay." I understand now. I didn't reply, not out of cruelty, but because I didn't want to reopen something I'd finally managed to close without slamming. Some things deserve silence, not as punishment, but as boundary. I saw Mara after school most days. She came up to talk books, to ask questions her teachers rushed past. One day she asked me what makes someone family. I said, "Time, love." Choosing to stay, she nodded like that made sense to her. Then she said, "Blood doesn't mean much if it makes you bleed." She's 12. I hope she remembers that when she's 30. I spent my afternoons baking again. Small things. Scones with orange peel. Tiny loaves of rosemary bread. I gave some to the shop, kept the rest wrapped in wax paper on the counter. Sometimes I ate dinner on the floor, cross-legged, watching the light fall across the cabinets. No one told me to hurry. No one asked what I was doing with my life. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I was waiting to be needed again. The apartment stayed quiet. No child crying, no voice raised. No footsteps pacing, demanding, expecting. Just the gentle creak of the boards and the occasional knock from a flower bucket below. I went to the library every Friday, got a card in my new name, read mysteries and cookbooks and a book of poems I didn't understand but liked the sound of. One line stuck with me. Even stillness has a rhythm. If you sit inside it long enough, I wrote it in my notebook. There are no photos of my son in the new apartment. Not because I've erased him, because I've released him. Let him become what he wanted to be. Let myself become someone else entirely. He lives in a different city now, I heard. A new job, a bigger house, the kind with a kitchen island and two-car garage. I picture it all white and gray, perfect for photographs. I wonder sometimes if he talks about me, if he's rewritten the story so that I drifted, not that I walked, that I changed, not that he took. It doesn't matter anymore, because the truth is this: I was a mother. I loved. I stayed. Until I couldn't stay where I was, no. Longer welcome now, I wake with the sun. I drink my tea slowly. I touch the windowsill as if it's an altar. Every few days, I take a walk to the edge of town, where a little path winds toward the water. It's not the ocean, just a narrow lake. But it's quiet. There are benches, sometimes. I sit and watch the ripples. Once, I picked up a stone and threw it as far as I could. Watched the circles widen, then fade. No one applauded. No one called my name. And still, I felt real. I brought a shell home once, just a smooth gray one. No spiral, no shine. I placed it on my table beside the recipe box. I named it Peace. This time, I decide who gets to call me anything else.